Is lasting peace, true global tranquility, merely a beautiful, naive dream? Or is it, against all evidence, an achievable reality? For generations, humanity has grappled with this profound, agonizing question, haunted relentlessly by the specter of endless conflict. Just cast your mind back through the annals of history, or simply turn on the news today. Picture the desolate, muddy trenches of the Somme, a generation consumed by a war declared to end all wars, only to sow the seeds for the next. Recall the shattering images from Sarajevo in the 90s, a city under siege, its people enduring unthinkable hardship. Remember the horrors of the Rwandan genocide, a grim testament to humanity's capacity for cruelty on an unimaginable scale. And now, in our present moment, turn on any news channel, and you are confronted with the raw, brutal reality of modern warfare, the desperate exodus of families fleeing violence in Sudan, the drone-eye views of cities like Kiev and Gaza reduced to rubble, entire lives irrevocably altered by bombs and bullets. The heart-wrenching cries of displaced children, the grim statistics of civilian casualties, the relentless drumbeat of aggression and suffering it echoes through our headlines daily, screaming of division, aggression, and human suffering on a global scale. It truly feels like a perpetual cycle, an inescapable, tragic fate woven into the very fabric of human existence. This ceaseless cycle of violence, this seemingly ingrained tendency towards war, makes the very idea of perpetual peace sound almost absurdly utopian. A naive fantasy, perhaps, peddled by idealists and dreamers, but certainly not a concept grounded in the harsh, brutal realities of our world. We watch superpowers flex their muscles, regional conflicts simmer and boil over, and the promise of global cooperation often feels like a distant, unattainable star. Surely, a true, lasting end to all wars is an impossibility, a relic of hopeful thinking from a bygone, more innocent era. But what if, contrary to all conventional wisdom, a comprehensive roadmap to lasting peace, a truly logical and practical blueprint for global harmony, has existed, quietly waiting to be fully understood for over 2 centuries? What if the answer wasn't buried in complex, contemporary international treaties or the grand political gestures of today's leaders, but in the pages of a relatively overlooked, yet incredibly profound philosophical essay? Imagine discovering a guide that doesn't rely on wishful thinking, on a naive belief in universal goodwill, but on deeply reasoned principles, on an almost startlingly practical and rational framework for human coexistence. This isn't some brand new political manifesto hot off the presses from the latest UN summit, nor is it a rediscovered ancient prophecy promising an end to suffering. No, our potential solution comes from an incredibly unexpected corner, a profound and influential essay penned in the tumultuous late 1790s by none other than the towering figure of Enlightenment philosophy, Immanuel Kant. Yes, Immanuel Kant. The same philosopher whose weighty critiques often feel abstract, dense, and perhaps far removed from the urgent, chaotic realities of our modern world. Yet in this particular, surprisingly accessible essay, written amidst a period convulsed by its own revolutionary wars and radical shifts in power dynamics, he laid out a profound and detailed framework he daringly called perpetual peace. It sounds almost ludicrously optimistic, doesn't it? An 18th century German philosopher holding the key to resolving the intractable conflicts of our fragmented, hyper-connected 21st century. But what if his ideas are not just theoretical musings or an academic exercise in abstract idealism, but a startlingly relevant and eminently actionable strategy for achieving true global stability? What if the path to truly ending all wars, to finally transcending this ancient, destructive cycle, is not a quixotic quest built on fleeting hope, but a meticulously reasoned journey founded on practical logic, a deep understanding of human nature, and a clear vision for just governance? Prepare to have your assumptions challenged as we delve into how a philosopher from over 200 years ago might just offer the most urgent, compelling, and surprisingly practical answer to the most pressing question of our time: can we actually end all wars? When you hear the name Immanuel Kant, what immediately springs to mind? For many, it's a picture of a notoriously abstract philosopher, perhaps peering over the rim of his spectacles from the pages of a dense textbook. We might imagine a brilliant but inaccessible mind dwelling in an ivory tower, meticulously constructing elaborate systems of thought that feel utterly divorced from the messy realities of daily life, let alone the cutthroat world of international politics. For a long time, I confess, that was my own mental image too, a monumental figure whose contributions felt distant, formidable, and perhaps a bit dusty. But what if I told you that this very same Kant, the architect of some of philosophy's most rigorous and demanding ethical and metaphysical systems, was also a radical political thinker, someone who dared to propose a concrete, actionable blueprint for nothing less than perpetual peace on earth? He wasn't just theorizing about ideals, he was sketching out a practical, legal framework designed to end war forever. That blueprint, audacious and visionary for its time, is laid out in his short but immensely powerful essay, Perpetual Peace, or Zum ewigen Frieden in its original German, published in 1795. It's a work that challenges us to look beyond temporary ceasefires and fragile truces, pushing us to envision a world where peace isn't merely the absence of war, but a fundamental, structural reality built on principles of justice and reason. Now, I'll be completely honest with you, my own intellectual journey with Kant's Perpetual Peace began with a deep-seated skepticism. I initially approached it as little more than an intriguing, yet ultimately naive, intellectual fantasy, a beautiful, perhaps even noble, dream, but surely one entirely divorced from the gritty, power-driven calculations that truly govern international relations. The very notion of perpetual peace seemed to belong more to the realm of utopian fiction than serious political philosophy. For years, I viewed it through the lens of a dismissive realism, concluding that human nature, with its inherent rivalries and ambitions, would always inevitably thwart such lofty ideals. Why bother with such grand pronouncements when history repeatedly demonstrates humanity's ceaseless capacity for conflict? However, as the years passed, and particularly as I found myself grappling with a world that often feels increasingly fractured, volatile, and dangerously interconnected, with conflicts erupting, democracies facing unprecedented challenges, and the search for global stability growing ever more urgent, a profound and unexpected shift began to take place in my perspective. I started to read Kant not just as a historical figure, but as an urgent contemporary voice. His arguments, far from being relics of the Enlightenment, began to resonate with an almost chilling prescience. The structural issues he identified, the solutions he proposed, felt not just relevant, but acutely, startlingly pertinent to the geopolitical landscape of the 21st century. I realized that what I had once dismissed as an impractical fantasy was, in fact, a deeply insightful and profoundly radical framework, one that offers not just hope, but a stark challenge to our present reality. And that, dear listener, is precisely the journey we're about to embark on together. Our goal in this video isn't simply to recount Kant's arguments or to treat them as academic curiosities. Instead, we're going to take his groundbreaking blueprint for peace, dust it off, and subject it to a rigorous, critical examination. We will explore whether his ambitious vision can, or indeed must, hold up in our complex, interconnected, and often volatile modern world. Can a philosopher from over 2 centuries ago truly offer us a viable, even revolutionary, path forward for achieving a lasting global peace? Is his framework a relic of a bygone era, or does it contain fundamental truths, perhaps even uncomfortable truths, that are essential for our collective survival and flourishing today? To tackle these formidable questions, we'll systematically unpack the core tenets of Kant's radical idea for peace. We will begin by diving deep into his first definitive article, the indispensable role of the Republican Constitution. We'll explore why Kant saw this form of government, founded on principles of freedom, dependence on a common law, and political equality, not just as a moral imperative, but as the foundational stone for preventing wars and fostering a culture of peace. It's not just about voting, it's about a fundamental restructuring of power that aligns the interests of the people with the decisions of the state regarding war and peace. From there, we will move to his second crucial article, the concept of a federation of free states. This is not some vision of a monolithic world government or a global empire, but rather a voluntary, non-coercive league or alliance of independent, republican states, bound together by shared legal principles and a commitment to resolving disputes through law rather than force. It's a vision that remarkably predates, and in some ways offers a more robust alternative to, many of the international institutions we know today. Next, we'll examine his third definitive article, cosmopolitan law, specifically the right to universal hospitality. This is arguably one of Kant's most radical and far-sighted ideas, arguing that every human being, regardless of their nationality or origin, possesses a fundamental right to visit other lands and to be treated with respect, not hostility. It's a profound challenge to xenophobia and isolationism, advocating for a global moral community that transcends national borders and narrow self-interest. Beyond these foundational definitive articles, we'll also delve into Kant's preliminary articles, the immediate, pragmatic steps nations must take to move towards peace, such as prohibiting secret treaties and standing armies. Crucially, we'll explore his powerful, often overlooked, insights into the indispensable role of public reason and transparency as vital checks on the exercise of power and as essential drivers for moral and political progress. Kant believed that reason, when exercised publicly, could illuminate the path to justice and compel states to act ethically. Finally, we will confront the practical criticisms leveled against Kant's vision throughout history, acknowledge its apparent failures in a world still plagued by conflict, and ultimately reflect on the enduring power and uncomfortable, yet undeniable, relevance of his radical idea for peace for our contemporary moment. This journey won't be easy, but it promises to be deeply illuminating, offering a fresh perspective on one of humanity's most persistent and urgent dilemmas. Welcome to The Will to Believe, an exploration of profound ideas that shape our understanding of truth, morality, and human action. In this journey, we often find ourselves drawing parallels to other great thinkers whose philosophies echo and amplify James's own insights. Today, we begin with a foundational contemplation on the very possibility of peace, diving into Chapter 1, The End of Secret Deals, where we examine the preliminary articles for perpetual peace as laid out by none other than Immanuel Kant. These aren't just academic musings, they are the bedrock principles that must be established before any lasting peace can even begin to take root. They speak to the very honesty and good faith required, concepts William James would undoubtedly appreciate in his pursuit of genuine belief. Kant, writing in the late 18th century, a time rife with shifting alliances and constant warfare, wasn't just dreaming of an impossible utopia. He was laying down practical, non-negotiable prerequisites. His first preliminary article states, unequivocally, no peace treaty shall be considered valid if it contains a secret reservation of the material for a future war. At its core, this is a demand for absolute transparency and genuine intent. A peace treaty, in Kant's view, isn't a mere ceasefire or a tactical pause in hostilities. It must be an earnest declaration of a will to end conflict, not a strategic maneuver to gain advantage for the next inevitable confrontation. This principle cuts to the very heart of what it means to genuinely seek peace. Think of it this way: we've all experienced the hollow feeling of a fake apology. Someone says, "I'm sorry," but you can sense, deep down, they're already plotting their next argument, preparing to rehash old grievances, or simply waiting for the opportune moment to resume the very behavior they're supposedly apologizing for. That's not reconciliation, that's manipulation. It breeds resentment and shatters trust, making any real resolution impossible. When nations engage in this kind of duplicity, signing agreements while secretly holding on to pretexts for future aggression, perhaps building up arms or cultivating hidden alliances, they aren't building peace. They're merely postponing war, ensuring that the next conflict will be fueled by even deeper suspicion and betrayal. True peace, therefore, begins with the simple yet profound act of honesty, laying all cards on the table and committing to a future free from the shadow of secret intent. Without this foundational transparency, any peace is built on sand, ready to collapse at the slightest tremor of distrust. Moving beyond the sincerity of intention, Kant also confronted another pervasive cause of conflict: the treatment of nations themselves. His second preliminary article, and indeed the spirit of his entire framework, implicitly condemns the practice of viewing sovereign states as mere commodities. No independent states, large or small, shall come under the dominion of another state by inheritance, exchange, purchase, or donation. This might seem self-evident today, but for centuries, nations, their territories, and their populations were treated as expandable assets, exchanged like property between monarchs, bought and sold, or simply conquered and absorbed without any regard for the will or identity of their inhabitants. The map of Europe, and indeed the world, was a testament to this practice, redrawn repeatedly by dynastic marriages, treaties of cession, or the brute force of armies. The long shadows of colonial legacies, for instance, are a vivid demonstration of the lasting damage caused by this historical mindset. Why is this a root cause of conflict? Because it fundamentally denies the inherent dignity and self-determination of a people. When a nation is treated as property, it is stripped of its agency, its culture, and its right to govern itself. This inevitably breeds deep-seated resentment, fuels nationalist movements, and creates cycles of rebellion and suppression that can erupt into devastating wars for generations. The idea that one people can simply own or dispose of another is a recipe for perpetual instability, fostering a sense of grievance and a perpetual desire for liberation that will inevitably lead to armed struggle. Lasting peace, Kant understood, requires a radical shift from treating territories as pawns in a geopolitical game to respecting the intrinsic sovereignty and self-governance of every distinct political community. It is a call to recognize the moral personhood of nations, not just individuals. These 18th century insights remain remarkably relevant in our 21st century world. Modern diplomacy, for all its complexities and occasional failings, strives towards the very transparency Kant advocated. International forums, multilateral agreements, and public negotiations at their best aim to prevent the kind of secret dealings that sow distrust, while clandestine operations and hidden agendas unfortunately still exist. The international norm now leans heavily towards open covenants, openly arrived at, recognizing that secrecy is the enemy of genuine resolution. We understand, perhaps more than ever, that trust is the scarcest and most valuable commodity in international relations, and transparency is its currency. Consider the countless territorial disputes that continue to plague our world, from border conflicts to contested regions with long, intertwined histories. Many of these disputes ultimately stem from a failure to uphold the principle that nations are not property. They arise when historical claims clash with the present-day will of a population, or when a larger power attempts to impose its dominion over a smaller, independent entity. Kant's ideas provide a critical lens through which to analyze these conflicts, suggesting that true resolution lies not in conquest or coercion, but in respecting the existing sovereignty and the inherent right to self-determination of all peoples involved. Ignoring these fundamental rights only perpetuates cycles of grievance and violence. The concept of national self-determination, so central to international law since the aftermath of two world wars, is a direct echo of Kant's insistence that states are not transferable property. It is the understanding that a group of people, bound by common identity, language, or culture, has the right to choose its own political future, free from external coercion. Deny this right, and you deny a people their fundamental dignity, ensuring a future filled with instability, proxy wars, and direct military interventions. Embrace it, and you lay the groundwork for a world where sovereign entities can coexist, interacting not as potential possessions but as respectful equals, building a collective security based on shared principles rather than forced subservience. Ultimately, Kant's preliminary articles for perpetual peace are more than just historical curiosities. They are foundational imperatives. They demand an upfront commitment to honesty, a rejection of treating nations as mere pawns, and an unwavering respect for self-determination. These are the non-negotiable first steps, the very bedrock upon which any genuine and lasting global peace must be constructed. Without them, any talk of peace is just a temporary lull, a fragile truce waiting for the next secret reservation or property claim to ignite the flames of conflict once more. They represent a moral compass, urging us toward a future built on good faith and mutual respect, where the will to believe in peace can finally find a solid ground, a truly perpetual peace. Welcome back, and if you're joining us for the first time, delve with us into the profound philosophical landscape painted by William James. In our exploration of the will to believe, we've begun to uncover how our beliefs shape our realities individually and collectively. Now, as we transition into our second chapter, The Arms Race to Nowhere, we're going to take a seemingly audacious detour into the realm of political philosophy, drawing inspiration from another titanic figure of thought, Immanuel Kant. His essay, Perpetual Peace, offers a series of preliminary articles for achieving lasting global harmony, one of which remains startlingly relevant and controversial centuries later. Kant, writing in 1795, proposed the radical idea that standing armies should in time be totally abolished. Pause for a moment and consider the sheer audacity of this statement. In an era where military might was synonymous with national power and security, Kant argued that permanent, professional armies, ever ready for conflict, are not guardians of peace, but rather its greatest impediment. He contended that they constantly threaten other states through the very fact of their existence, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust. A state with a formidable standing army is perpetually prepared for war, making it an all-too-easy option for leaders who might otherwise seek diplomatic solutions. The soldiers themselves become mere instruments of state policy rather than citizens defending their homeland, reducing humanity to a means rather than an end. For Kant, the continuous drilling, the expenditure on armaments, the sheer omnipresence of military force, all serve as an implicit declaration of war against one's neighbors, fostering a climate where conflict is not only possible but perpetually anticipated. Fast forward to our present age, and Kant's prescience feels almost unnerving. We live in a world grappling with what President Eisenhower famously termed the military-industrial complex, a powerful alliance between the defense industry and government, whose interests are often aligned with maintaining high levels of military spending and, by extension, perpetual readiness for conflict. The cost of this global arms race is staggering. While precise figures fluctuate, annual global defense spending consistently runs into the trillions of US dollars. Imagine for a moment what could be achieved if even a fraction of these resources were redirected, eradicating poverty, combating climate change, investing in universal health care, revolutionizing education. Instead, vast sums are poured into the production and maintenance of weaponry, into the salaries and infrastructure of armies that, according to Kant, perpetuate the very threat they claim to defend against. This system, by its very nature, has a vested interest in the continuation of threats, real or perceived, making any move towards disarmament incredibly complex and politically fraught. Of course, the immediate counter-argument to Kant's radical proposal arises almost instinctively: deterrence. Proponents of standing armies argue that peace through strength is the only realistic path. A strong military, they contend, discourages potential aggressors. Why would another state attack if they know the retaliation would be devastating? This logic suggests that the very threat of overwhelming force prevents its use, creating a stable, if tense, equilibrium. But Kant, ever the astute observer of human nature and political reality, was quick to dismantle this notion of deterrence as true peace. He saw it not as peace, but as an uneasy truce, a temporary cessation of hostilities based on mutual fear, not mutual respect or genuine harmony. For Kant, this armed peace merely postpones actual conflict while keeping the spirit of war alive. It fosters a relentless cycle of escalation. My strength demands your strength, which then necessitates my greater strength ad infinitum. This volatile balance, maintained by the constant specter of war, is incredibly fragile, prone to collapse through miscalculation, misunderstanding, or a simple shift in power dynamics. It's a peace that stands perpetually on the brink. So this brings us to a profound question, perhaps one that requires a certain will to believe in its possibility. What would a world without permanent armies truly look like? It sounds utopian, doesn't it? But if we take Kant's premise seriously, that standing armies are a fundamental obstacle to perpetual peace, what are the alternatives? He himself suggested that defensive citizen militias, strictly for the protection of one's own territory, might be permissible, distinct from professional forces designed for external projection of power. Beyond that, we might envision a world where international law and robust diplomatic institutions hold far greater sway, where conflicts are resolved through arbitration and negotiation, not the threat of military might. Perhaps a global shift in priorities, where national security is defined not by military spending, but by economic stability, educational attainment, and a commitment to shared humanitarian goals. It would require a monumental leap of faith, a collective decision to dismantle the mechanisms of war and actively build mechanisms of peace. Is perpetual peace an impossible dream, an abstract philosophical ideal utterly detached from the gritty realities of human conflict? Or is it a necessary aspiration, a destination we must collectively strive for, guided by the understanding that our current path, paved with the ever-present threat of military force, is indeed an arms race to nowhere? This isn't merely an academic exercise, it's a contemplation of our species' future, asking us to apply our will, not just to believe in a better way, but to actively forge it. While William James extensively explored the intricate landscape of belief, will, and the human experience, the philosophical spirit of grappling with profound ethical dilemmas extends naturally to the realm of international relations, shaping our very understanding of global coexistence and responsibility. In this chapter, we delve into a cornerstone of international thought, a principle that, much like an individual's moral compass, seeks to guide the behavior of nations, the golden rule of non-interference. This seemingly straightforward dictum, rooted deeply in the Enlightenment and rigorously articulated by Immanuel Kant, presents a complex ethical challenge when confronted with the stark realities of human suffering. At its core, Kant's strict principle of non-intervention, as outlined in his seminal work Perpetual Peace, is remarkably clear and absolute. No state shall forcibly interfere in the constitution and government of another state. For Kant, this was not merely a pragmatic suggestion, but a categorical imperative, a preliminary article essential for establishing lasting peace among nations. His rationale was multifaceted. He believed that states, much like individuals, possess a form of autonomy and self-determination. To interfere, even with seemingly good intentions, undermines this sovereignty, sets a dangerous precedent for reciprocal interference, and inevitably sows the seeds for future conflict, thereby jeopardizing the very perpetual peace he envisioned. Such interventions, he argued, treat a sovereign state as mere property, an instrument to be manipulated, rather than an end in itself. This respect for state sovereignty became a foundational pillar of modern international law, a bulwark against the ceaseless wars that had plagued Europe. However, the historical consequences of foreign intervention, or the often euphemistic practice of nation-building, have painted a grim and complex picture, frequently validating Kant's warnings. from colonial powers imposing their will and systems upon subjugated peoples, to Cold War-era proxy conflicts that destabilized entire regions, and more recent attempts at regime change and democratic imposition in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, the outcomes have often been catastrophic. These interventions, regardless of their stated aims, have frequently led to prolonged instability, humanitarian crises, the erosion of local self-governance, the rise of extremist factions, and deep-seated resentment that can fester for generations. The high human and financial costs, coupled with the frequent failure to achieve lasting positive change, underscore the profound challenges and ethical ambiguities inherent in the act of external interference. History is replete with examples where noble intentions have paved the road to unforeseen and tragic consequences, leaving behind a trail of shattered societies and broken promises. This leads us to the heart of the ethical dilemma, the fundamental challenge to Kant's absolute rule. What happens when non-interference becomes complicity? What is the moral imperative when a sovereign state commits atrocities against its own population, engaging in genocide, widespread ethnic cleansing, or severe and systematic human rights abuses? The harrowing images from Rwanda in 1994, where nearly 1 million people were slaughtered while the world largely stood by, or the Bosnian genocide in Srebrenica, indelibly carved this question into the global conscience. Here, the strict adherence to the principle of sovereignty clashed violently with a universal moral outcry and the nascent recognition of universal human rights. Is sovereignty truly absolute? We are forced to ask when it becomes a shield behind which mass murder is perpetrated. The tension between respecting a nation's internal affairs and the responsibility to act in the face of such unspeakable atrocities presents a profound moral paradox. To intervene risks violating sovereignty, potentially escalating conflict and causing further suffering, yet to stand by and do nothing risks betraying our fundamental human obligations, turning the golden rule of non-interference into an abject failure of moral courage. It was out of this crucible of moral failure and legal impasse that the modern responsibility to protect, or R2P doctrine, emerged as a direct challenge to Kant's absolute principle. Endorsed unanimously by the UN General Assembly in 2005, R2P represents a significant evolution in international thought, seeking to bridge the chasm between state sovereignty and human rights. It rests on 3 foundational pillars. First, that each state has the primary responsibility to protect its own population from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. Second, that the international community has a responsibility to assist states in fulfilling this responsibility, and critically, third, that if a state manifestly fails to protect its population, the international community has the responsibility to take appropriate collective action through diplomatic, humanitarian, and other peaceful means, and, as a last resort, through coercive measures like sanctions and military intervention authorized by the UN Security Council. R2P acknowledges that sovereignty is not merely a right, but a responsibility, and when a state fails in this most basic duty to its people, that responsibility shifts to the international community. While offering a framework for addressing the atrocities that plagued the 20th century, R2P itself remains highly controversial, fraught with debates over its selective application, potential for abuse by powerful states, and the enduring challenges posed by geopolitical realities and the UN Security Council's veto power. Thus, the golden rule of non-interference remains a deeply contested and dynamic principle. Kant's foundational warning against intervention continues to resonate, reminding us of the perils of external meddling and the importance of national self-determination. Yet, the brutal lessons of mass atrocities compel us to confront the limits of absolute non-interference. The journey from Kant's strict dictum to the evolving doctrine of the responsibility to protect reflects humanity's ongoing struggle to balance competing moral imperatives, the preservation of sovereign order versus the protection of universal human dignity. It is a dialogue without easy answers, demanding constant ethical reflection, pragmatic assessment, and a willingness to confront difficult choices, much in the spirit of the live, forced, and momentous options that William James himself explored in the landscape of individual belief. The search for a just and peaceful international order is an unending one, perpetually tested by the complex demands of our interconnected world. Welcome back to our exploration of the will to believe, as we delve into Kant's profound vision for global peace. Our journey today brings us to what he called the first definitive article for perpetual peace, an idea so influential it echoes through modern political thought, the notion that republican states are inherently more peaceful. To truly grasp Kant's argument, we first need to understand what he meant by a republic. In the late 18th century, the term carried a very specific weight, distinct from what we might broadly call a democracy today. For Kant, a republic wasn't just a state without a monarch. Crucially, it was a form of government characterized by two essential features: representation and the separation of powers. Representation meant that citizens, through elected delegates, would have a voice in the legislative process. It was a step removed from pure direct democracy, which Kant, like many Enlightenment thinkers, viewed with suspicion, fearing it could easily devolve into mob rule or an unchecked despotism of the majority. Instead, elected representatives were meant to deliberate and act with a broader, more reasoned perspective. The separation of powers, the second pillar, meant that the executive branch, responsible for implementing laws, was distinct from the legislative branch, which made them. This was a critical safeguard against tyranny, ensuring that no single entity could hold absolute power, a system we now recognize in many modern constitutional governments. So, when Kant spoke of a republic, he envisioned a government of laws, not of men, where power was distributed and accountability was built into the very structure. Now, why did Kant believe this specific type of government was inherently more peaceful? This is where his core logic, elegant in its simplicity, truly shines. He argued that in a republican state, the decision to go to war would require the consent of the citizens, or at least their representatives. And here's the crucial part: it's these very citizens who bear the immense costs of war. They are the ones who will be conscripted into service, whose lives will be risked, whose families will mourn, and whose livelihoods will be disrupted. They are the ones who will pay the higher taxes needed to fund military campaigns, enduring economic hardship long after the last shot is fired. Contrast this with a monarch or an autocratic ruler. Such a leader, removed from the immediate suffering and financial burden of their populace, can declare war almost on a whim. Their personal treasury might not be depleted, their own life is rarely on the line. They might even see war as a path to personal glory, territorial expansion, or increased power, with little direct consequence to themselves. In Kant's view, this disconnect between the decision-maker and the cost-bearer makes autocracies inherently more prone to aggression. But in a republic, the calculus changes dramatically. When the people themselves, or their directly accountable representatives, must vote on war, they are forced to weigh the immense personal and societal costs against any potential benefits. It introduces a powerful disincentive to rash military action. Citizens, being rational, are less likely to enthusiastically endorse a conflict that will bring them suffering and economic hardship unless the cause is truly just and the threat undeniably existential. This careful deliberation, this shared sacrifice, Kant believed, would naturally lead republics to be far more cautious, far more reluctant to wage war, especially against other republics. This 18th century insight laid the foundation for one of the most significant and debated concepts in modern political science, democratic peace theory. In its simplest form, this theory posits that mature liberal democracies rarely, if ever, go to war against each other. It's not that democracies never fight, they certainly do, often against non-democratic states, but rather that a unique zone of peace seems to exist between them. The historical evidence for democratic peace theory is compelling and, for many, quite persuasive. Since the end of World War II, as the number of stable democracies has grown, the incidence of interstate warfare between them has been remarkably low. The idea that countries like the United States and Canada, or Germany and France, after their profound reconciliation, would engage in armed conflict is almost unthinkable today. Proponents point to this observable phenomenon as strong support for Kant's original proposition. They argue that democracies share common norms of peaceful conflict resolution, respect for international law, and a mutual recognition of the legitimacy of each other's governments, making military confrontation between them highly unlikely. Furthermore, their economic interdependence often creates powerful disincentives for war. However, like any robust theory, democratic peace theory also faces its critics and nuances. One primary challenge lies in the definition of democracy itself. What constitutes a mature liberal democracy? If two states engage in conflict and both claim to be democratic, some critics argue that the theory's proponents might then retrospectively declare one or both to be not truly democratic, leading to a kind of no true Scotsman fallacy. Others point to historical instances that, while not direct wars, represent significant tensions or proxy conflicts between states that could, at least arguably, be called democratic at the time. Another point of contention is whether it's solely democracy that prevents war between these states, or if other factors are equally or more influential. Our shared economic interests, the presence of powerful international institutions like the United Nations or NATO, the deterrent effect of nuclear weapons, or even just the absence of geographical proximity and conflicting interests, the real drivers of this peace. Some scholars suggest that while democracy is a factor, it often works in conjunction with these other conditions. Moreover, the process of democratization itself can be a period of instability. Newly democratizing states, often grappling with fragile institutions, internal divisions, and external pressures, can sometimes be more prone to conflict, both domestically and internationally, as they navigate their transition. This doesn't necessarily undermine the core theory about mature democracies, but adds a crucial layer of complexity. Despite these debates, Kant's first definitive article remains a cornerstone of international relations theory. The observation that representative governments, where citizens bear the costs of war and have a say in starting it, tend towards peace with one another is a powerful and enduring idea. It suggests that the internal structure of a state has profound implications for its external conduct, offering a glimmer of hope that as more nations embrace truly republican principles, the prospect of perpetual peace might move ever closer to reality. Welcome back. In this fifth chapter, A United Nations of Kant, we're turning our attention to Immanuel Kant's profound vision for international peace, specifically his second definitive article for perpetual peace. This section explores an enduring philosophical aspiration: how can humanity truly achieve lasting peace? Immanuel Kant, in Perpetual Peace, offered not a utopian fantasy, but a pragmatic, morally grounded blueprint for a world free from war. His second definitive article proposes a federation of free states. Crucially, Kant was not advocating for a single, monolithic world government, a global superstate erasing national identities or sovereignty. For him, that would breed tyranny. Instead, he envisioned a League of Peace, or Foedus Pacificum, a voluntary association of independent nations. Each state would retain its sovereignty, but willingly bind itself to common international laws designed explicitly to prevent conflict. This was radical, nations choosing to limit their right to wage war, not out of fear, but out of a shared commitment to reason, moral duty, and the collective good. It was about mutual respect and resolving disputes through law, not battle. The resonance of Kant's vision with modern international institutions is truly remarkable. The most obvious inheritor of this Kantian ideal is the United Nations. Born from the ashes of two world wars, the UN was designed as a forum for nations to deliberate, negotiate, and enforce international law without infringing on member sovereignty. Its charter echoes Kant's call for a voluntary league. Another powerful real-world manifestation is the European Union. Beginning as a coal and steel community to make war materially impossible, the EU evolved into a unique political and economic union. Member states have pooled sovereignty, adhering to a shared legal framework and common policies, explicitly fostering peace and prosperity. Both institutions, in their distinct ways, represent humanity's conscious effort to move towards a Kantian realm of reasoned cooperation. Yet, the path to perpetual peace remains fraught. Both the UN and EU, while embodying Kant's spirit, have faced successes and failures in preventing conflict. The United Nations has undeniably prevented countless wars through diplomacy, mediation, and peacekeeping. Its humanitarian efforts, global health initiatives, and forums for international dialogue on climate change and human rights have saved millions and set vital norms. However, its effectiveness is often hampered by the very structure protecting national sovereignty. The Security Council, with its veto power, can be paralyzed by rivalries, leading to tragic inaction. Its inability to enforce resolutions without member state political will remain an Achilles heel. The European Union stands as an unprecedented success in achieving peace among its members. For over 7 decades, former warring nations now resolve affairs through law and democratic processes. It has fostered shared identity, a single market, and free movement. Yet, integration's ambition also creates friction. A democratic deficit fuels populist discontent, Economic disparities create tensions, and Brexit highlights the fragility of even advanced leagues when faced with nationalism. Its common foreign policy often struggles to speak with one voice, revealing limits of pooled sovereignty. So, if Kant observed our world today, he would acknowledge progress, but also the persistent moral imperative to do more. Strengthening international cooperation, consistent with his model, requires several things. Firstly, unwavering commitment from nations to international law, upholding treaties and respecting judicial rulings. Secondly, institutional reform, rethinking bodies like the Security Council for greater representation or empowering regional organizations. Thirdly, cultivating a deeper cosmopolitan mindset among citizens, recognizing that shared humanity transcends borders and global challenges like climate change or pandemics demand collective action. Kant's vision isn't a static blueprint. It's a perpetual process, a moral journey where reason triumphs over raw power and common laws bind us through a shared recognition of our duty to peace. It demands courage, patience, and an enduring belief in humanity's capacity for progress. We arrive now at Chapter 6, delving into the third definitive article for perpetual peace as proposed by Immanuel Kant, the right to visit, not conquer, often termed universal hospitality or cosmopolitan right. In our exploration of William James's pragmatic philosophy, we find ourselves, perhaps surprisingly, drawing upon Kant's foundational ethical frameworks to understand how a global community, much like the individual will to believe, requires certain preconditions of trust and mutual respect. Kant's vision for perpetual peace, articulated in the late 18th century, offers not a utopian fantasy, but a practical, progressive blueprint for a world where states can coexist without constant war. His third definitive article is particularly prescient, urging us to consider the rights of individuals in a global context beyond the confines of their nation-states. At its heart, cosmopolitan right is the right of a person not to be treated as an enemy when they arrive in another land. It's a remarkably simple, yet profoundly powerful, concept that lays the moral groundwork for what we might now call a global civil society. To understand this right, it's crucial to clarify what it is and what it is not. Kant's universal hospitality is not a right to settlement, nor is it an automatic claim to citizenship or permanent residence. Rather, it is fundamentally a right to safe passage and the possibility of a temporary visit. Imagine a traveler arriving on a foreign shore. Kant argues that this individual has a right to be received, at least initially, not as a hostile invader, but as a potential guest. They cannot simply be cast out or killed without cause. This principle acknowledges our shared humanity and the fact that the earth itself is, in a fundamental sense, a common dwelling place. No one person or nation has an absolute, exclusive right to any part of it, especially to the extent of making the lives of others utterly impossible there. This 18th century idea, penned by a philosopher in Königsberg, resonates with astonishing clarity in the 21st century. Today, our world is characterized by unprecedented movement of people. We grapple daily with complex debates surrounding immigration, the urgent plight of refugees fleeing conflict or disaster, and the broader implications of globalization. Kant's concept of universal hospitality provides a crucial moral lens through which to view these contemporary challenges. When we see headlines about migrant caravans, asylum seekers at borders, or international aid efforts, the underlying tension often boils down to this very right How should one community respond to another arriving on its doorstep? Here, the tension between national security and our shared human responsibility to others becomes starkly apparent. Every nation-state has legitimate concerns about its borders, its security, its economic stability, and its cultural integrity. These are valid considerations for any sovereign entity. Yet, Kant's article compels us to ask, at what point do these legitimate concerns override our fundamental ethical obligation to treat fellow human beings with basic decency and respect, especially when they are vulnerable? Is there a universal standard of compassion that must temper the pursuit of national self-interest? This isn't about abolishing borders overnight, but about fostering a mindset where the first instinct towards an arriving stranger isn't fear or hostility, but a recognition of their inherent human dignity. Beyond crises, this cosmopolitan right forms a powerful moral basis for the everyday interactions that define our interconnected world. Consider global tourism. Millions travel across borders daily, largely unmolested, because there is an unspoken agreement, a societal expectation of universal hospitality. We visit foreign lands, enjoy their culture, contribute to their economies, and expect to be treated as guests, not enemies. The same applies to international trade and commerce. Merchants and goods move across vast distances under an implicit understanding of safe passage and fair dealing, fostering economic interdependence and mutual benefit. Even cultural exchange, the sharing of ideas, arts, and traditions, relies on this openness to the other, a willingness to host and engage with perspectives from beyond one's immediate sphere. In essence, Kant's third definitive article is an ethical demand for openness, a plea for states to move beyond an inherent posture of suspicion towards strangers. It calls for a recognition that our individual lives are increasingly intertwined with those beyond our national boundaries, and that a peaceful, prosperous global future depends on cultivating a shared sense of responsibility. It's a challenging ideal, certainly requiring a leap of faith, not unlike some of William James's arguments for the will to believe. But it offers a profound starting point for envisioning a world where every person, regardless of their origin, can travel, visit, and engage with others, fostering understanding and collaboration, rather than being met with closed doors or hostile gazes. It's the right to knock and to expect, at the very least, a hearing rather than immediate condemnation. This, perhaps, is the true foundation of a truly global community. Welcome back, or perhaps just welcome, to the Will to Believe and our journey through the fascinating, often surprising corners of philosophical thought. Today, we arrive at Chapter 7, provocatively titled, Why Politicians Should Listen to Philosophers, the Secret Article. And yes, we're going to delve into a little-known, rather cheeky, piece of advice from none other than Immanuel Kant himself. Now, when you picture philosophers engaging with politicians, you might imagine hushed debates in smoky backrooms, or perhaps earnest academics penning long, unread treatises. But Kant, in his 1795 essay Perpetual Peace, a philosophical sketch, offered a more pragmatic and frankly hilarious approach. He proposed what he called a secret article to his preliminary articles for perpetual peace. And this secret article was essentially a whisper, an aside, a knowing wink to those in power, suggesting that the maxims of the philosophers concerning the conditions under which public peace is possible shall be consulted by states armed for war. In simpler terms, Kant's advice was, at its heart, hey, politicians! You know, us philosophers, we've actually thought a lot about peace, justice, and how societies ought to be structured. We've got some good ideas. You don't have to admit you got them from us. You don't even have to tell anyone you're listening. Just listen It was Kant's way of saying, listen to the experts, but with a sly understanding of the political ego, a recognition that perhaps appearing to take advice from a theoretician wasn't always the best optics. The humor lies in that secret part, the implication that politicians might be too proud or too focused on immediate power to openly acknowledge the profound, long-term insights that philosophical inquiry can offer. But this isn't merely a historical anecdote about a grumpy Königsberg professor. Kant's secret article broadens into a fundamental principle, the vital role of public reason, expert consultation, and long-term ethical thinking in politics. It argues that governance, particularly on matters of war and peace, cannot afford to be purely reactive, driven by short-term electoral cycles or narrowly defined national interests alone. Instead, it demands a deeper engagement with underlying principles, moral frameworks, and the comprehensive human experience. Public reason, in the Enlightenment sense, means opening up political discourse to all rational arguments, testing assumptions, and seeking universalizable principles, not just expedient solutions. Experts and philosophers are experts in ethics, logic, and critical thought bring this essential depth, offering perspectives that transcend the immediate political fray and consider the enduring consequences of actions. They encourage leaders to lift their gaze from the next news cycle to the next generation, from immediate gains to lasting peace and justice. And this call for consultation isn't just some quaint 18th century dream, it manifests powerfully in our modern world. Today, Kant's philosophers might be found not just in university philosophy departments, but also in the myriad think tanks, academic institutions, and public intellectual circles that shape policy debates. Consider the Rand Corporation, the Brookings Institution, Chatham House, or the Council on Foreign Relations. These are organizations dedicated to bringing rigorous research, historical context, and ethical frameworks to bear on complex foreign policy challenges. Academics specializing in international relations, political theory, and ethics regularly advise governments, write influential papers, and participate in policy dialogues. Public intellectuals, through books, articles, and media appearances, translate complex ideas into accessible language, fostering a more informed citizenry and holding leaders accountable to higher ideals. These groups, in essence, provide the deep, ethical thinking in governance that Kant so passionately advocated for, even if their advice isn't always followed or publicly acknowledged. This brings us to the crux of the matter, the importance of letting ethical principles guide hard-nosed political decisions. It's often tempting for politicians to dismiss ethical considerations as idealistic, impractical, or even naive when faced with the harsh realities of power politics. Realpolitik often reigns supreme, prioritizing national interest, security, and economic advantage above all else. But history is replete with examples where a purely pragmatic, immoral approach led to unforeseen disasters, prolonged conflicts, and ultimately a diminishment of national standing and global trust. Ethical principles, justice, fairness, human dignity, respect for international law are not merely abstract ideals. They are the bedrock of sustainable peace and legitimate governance. They offer a compass in turbulent times, providing a framework for making difficult choices that resonate with universal human values. When decisions about war, intervention, trade, or climate are stripped of their ethical dimensions, they risk becoming short-sighted, self-defeating, and destructive. Listening to philosophers, or rather, embracing the philosophical approach, means asking not just what can we do, but what should we do and why. It means understanding that true strength in leadership comes not from an unwavering adherence to power alone, but from the wisdom to weave ethical considerations into the very fabric of policy. So, perhaps politicians are listening to philosophers, perhaps they're just keeping it a secret, just as Kant humorously suggested. And in doing so, they are not weakening their resolve, but strengthening their foundation for a more just, peaceful, and ultimately more pragmatic world. The secret, after all, is out. Deep ethical thinking is not a luxury for governance, it is an absolute necessity. Having traversed the broad landscapes of international relations and philosophical thought, examining the very architecture of belief and its impact on the world stage, we now turn our gaze inward. From the grand political treaties and the weighty pronouncements of nations, we bring the essence of peace closer to home, to the intimate sphere of our personal lives and the communities we inhabit. This chapter, Making Peace Personal, invites us to consider how the profound principles of respect, transparency, and reason, which form the bedrock of any lasting global accord, can be diligently applied in our own daily existence to build peace from the ground up, one interaction, one relationship at a time. It's about recognizing that the blueprints for a harmonious world aren't solely for diplomats and statespeople, but for each of us right here, right now. Let's begin with a question that might seem almost whimsical at first glance. How do the principles of a peace treaty apply to our personal disagreements? Think for a moment about a recurring friction in your own life, perhaps with a spouse, a sibling, a close friend, or a colleague. Just as nations must sit at a table, acknowledge grievances, and negotiate terms for a ceasefire and future cooperation, so too can we approach our personal conflicts with a similar intentionality. It's about more than just making up after an argument. It's about establishing shared understandings, articulating expectations with clarity and honesty, and agreeing on boundaries and pathways forward. It means striving for transparency about our feelings and needs, exercising reason to understand the other's perspective, and fostering mutual respect even amidst disagreement. A personal peace treaty isn't a signed document, of course, but a conscious commitment to a set of principles that govern how we engage, how we resolve, and how we ultimately strengthen our bonds, ensuring that conflicts, when they inevitably arise, lead to deeper understanding rather than lasting estrangement. It transforms fleeting ceasefires into genuine, sustainable harmony within our most cherished relationships. Building on this, let's explore the concept of non-interference within our personal sphere. In the realm of international relations, non-interference speaks to the sovereignty of nations, their right to self-govern without external meddling. How might this translate to our personal lives? It means truly respecting the autonomy of our friends and family. This isn't a call for indifference or detachment, quite the opposite. It's an active recognition that those we love have their own journey, their own choices to make, their own beliefs to hold. Even when those choices or beliefs diverge from our own, it's about offering support without imposing solutions, giving advice without dictating actions, and listening without judgment or the immediate impulse to fix everything. True respect for autonomy allows individuals the space to grow, to learn from their own experiences, and to forge their own path. It acknowledges that even in the closest relationships, there must be room for individuality, for personal boundaries, and for the freedom to be one's authentic self. This non-interference cultivates a deeper form of trust and respect, laying the groundwork for more resilient and peaceful personal connections. And what about hospitality? While we often associate hospitality with opening our homes to guests, let's consider it as a daily, active practice of welcoming. More than just inviting people to dinner, it's about consciously extending an open mind and heart to new people, new ideas, and different perspectives within our communities. It's the willingness to engage with someone whose background or worldview is entirely different from our own, not with suspicion or defensiveness, but with genuine curiosity and a desire to understand. It means being receptive to novel concepts, even those that challenge our established beliefs, allowing them space for consideration rather than immediate dismissal. This expansive view of hospitality creates a vibrant, inclusive community fabric where diversity is not merely tolerated but celebrated, where dialogue flourishes, and where common ground can be discovered amidst differences. It's the active antidote to tribalism and insularity, fostering an environment where empathy thrives and understanding becomes the norm. Ultimately, this journey brings us to a profound realization: perpetual peace isn't some abstract ideal reserved solely for diplomats negotiating intricate global accords. It's not a utopian dream to be achieved only by politicians in grand conference halls. Rather, it is fundamentally a mindset, a deeply ingrained personal commitment, a way of being that each of us can cultivate in our own lives every single day. It's the daily practice of seeking understanding over conflict, of extending respect even when it's difficult, of embracing transparency in our dealings, and of applying reason to navigate our disagreements. By consciously choosing these principles in our personal interactions, in our families, in our workplaces, and in our local communities, we contribute directly to the larger tapestry of global peace. We become the very architects of a more harmonious world, proving that peace truly begins at home, in the heart, and in the hands of individuals committed to building it, one mindful interaction at a time. It's a perpetual endeavor, a continuous aspiration, and a deeply personal responsibility we all share. The journey to becoming an agent of peace isn't some grand, abstract philosophical quest reserved for academics. It's a daily practice, an active engagement with the world, much in the spirit of William James's pragmatic call to action. While James explored the will to believe, we can apply a similar energy to the will to act ethically, drawing inspiration from Kant's profound insights into duty, reason, and the categorical imperative. Kant teaches us that morality isn't about consequences, but about universalizable principles acting in ways that we could reasonably wish all others to act. It's about treating humanity, in yourself and in others, always as an end and never merely as a means. This isn't just theory, it's a powerful lens through which to engage with your world, transforming abstract concepts into tangible, empowering steps. This 7-day plan invites you to embody these principles, making them a living part of your daily existence. Each step is designed to expand your moral imagination, challenge your assumptions, and cultivate a deeper, more active commitment to peace in your community and beyond. Day 1. To expand your world. To begin our journey, we must first recognize the inherent limitations of our own subjective experience. Kant reminds us that true moral reasoning strives for universalizability, a perspective that transcends our personal biases and immediate desires. Our first 2 days are dedicated to intentionally broadening that perspective. Your mission: choose one of the following. First, read a news source from a country other than your own. Seek out reputable outlets that offer a different geopolitical or cultural viewpoint. How do they frame global events? What issues do they prioritize? Secondly, dedicate time to learning about a culture significantly different from your own. This could involve exploring its history, art, philosophy, or social customs. Watch a documentary, read an essay, or listen to music from that culture. Why this matters: by deliberately exposing ourselves to diverse perspectives, we challenge our own maxims, our unexamined assumptions about how the world works and how people ought to behave. We begin to see the vast array of rational agents, each with their own context and values. This isn't about agreeing with every viewpoint, but about understanding the rational frameworks behind them. It's an exercise in empathetic reason, a foundational step toward envisioning a world where our actions could become universal laws that respect all humanity. It cultivates the intellectual humility necessary to engage with the world, not just from our own standpoint, but from a more universal, impartial perspective. This expansion of understanding is crucial for moving beyond tribalism and toward a more globally conscious ethic of peace. Day 3-4, practice dialogue. With a broader perspective cultivated, it's time to apply this understanding in direct human interaction. Kant's second formulation of the categorical imperative to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never simply as a means but always at the same time as an end, is incredibly pertinent here. In this activity, we actively practice seeing the full personhood, the rational dignity, in someone with whom we may fundamentally disagree. Your mission for these 2 days: engage in a respectful conversation with someone whose views on a significant topic diverge from your own. This isn't about debate or winning an argument. Your sole objective is to understand their perspective, their reasoning, and the values that underpin their beliefs. Listen more than you speak. Ask open-ended questions like, "Could you tell me more about why you feel that way?" Or "What experiences led you to this conclusion?" Avoid judgment, interruption, or trying to persuade. Simply aim to grasp their point of view as thoroughly as possible. Why this matters in a world often fractured by ideological divides? This exercise is a radical act of peace. By treating the other person not as an obstacle to your own belief or a target for conversion, but as a rational agent whose perspective is worthy of your full attention and respect, you uphold their inherent dignity. You are recognizing their autonomy and reason as an end in itself. This act of genuine listening fosters mutual respect even when disagreement persists. It reduces the likelihood of dehumanization, a prerequisite for conflict, and lays the groundwork for finding common ground or, at the very least, coexisting peacefully despite differences. It's an active demonstration of the moral duty to engage with fellow rational beings with reverence for their capacity to reason. Day 5-6, local hospitality. Kant's philosophy, while often seen as abstract, has profoundly practical implications for how we build communities. The categorical imperative demands that we act in ways that could be universalized. Imagine a world where everyone actively welcomed and supported newcomers. This is the spirit behind our next 2 days, focusing on tangible acts of local hospitality and community building. Your mission: choose one of these concrete actions. First, actively welcome a new neighbor to your community. This could be as simple as introducing yourself and offering assistance, or sharing local recommendations. Second, make a point of supporting a local business owned by immigrants or refugees. Engage with the owners, learn a bit about their journey if appropriate, and contribute to their economic well-being. Or third, volunteer your time to a local organization that supports refugees, asylum seekers, or new arrivals in your community. This could be anything from helping with language practice to assisting with practical needs. Why this matters: these actions translate abstract ethical principles into visible, impactful gestures. When we welcome a new neighbor, we are actively creating a community where every individual is treated as an end, a valuable member whose presence enriches the whole. Supporting immigrant-owned businesses isn't just an economic act, it's a statement of solidarity and a recognition of the inherent worth and contribution of every person, regardless of their origin. Volunteering for refugee organizations directly addresses the needs of those who often find themselves most vulnerable, extending a hand of universal care. Each of these acts embodies a maxim that, if universalized, would lead to a more compassionate, inclusive, and peaceful society. It's about building a kingdom of ends not just in theory, but in the very fabric of our everyday lives, fostering a sense of belonging and shared humanity that cuts across artificial divides. It's a proactive step in building the kind of world where one would wish to be welcomed if one were in a similar situation. Day 7: Civic Reflection. As we conclude our week, it's essential to move beyond individual acts and consider the broader societal structures that either promote or hinder peace. Kant's vision wasn't just about individual ethics but also about a perpetual peace among nations, founded on rational principles and just laws. This final day encourages you to reflect on peace at a larger scale. Your mission: take some quiet time to reflect and write down what peace truly means to you. Is it merely the absence of conflict, or does it encompass justice, equity, and opportunity? Once you've clarified your personal definition, identify one local or national policy that you believe genuinely promotes your vision of peace. This could be a policy related to education, healthcare, environmental protection, social welfare, criminal justice reform, or international diplomacy. Consider how this policy aligns with Kantian principles of universalizability, respect for persons, and the creation of a society where all rational beings can flourish. Why this matters: this final step encourages you to connect your personal ethical journey with the collective moral project of building a just society. By articulating your definition of peace, you gain clarity on your own moral compass. By identifying a policy that aligns with it, you begin to see how Kantian ethics can inform and critique the very structures of power. This exercise encourages you to be an informed, active citizen, one who can advocate for policies that treat all individuals as ends in themselves, fostering a society based on universalizable principles rather than arbitrary power or self-interest. It's about recognizing that our individual acts of peace are powerful, but they gain even greater leverage when we collectively advocate for systemic changes that embed those principles into the laws and institutions that govern us all. This reflection transforms you from a mere participant into a conscious architect of a more peaceful world, understanding that sustained peace requires both individual virtue and collective, rational governance. This 7-day plan is not an endpoint, but a beginning. It's an invitation to cultivate a Kantian sensibility in your daily life, to recognize the profound moral weight of your choices, and to actively, pragmatically, contribute to a more just and peaceful world. Just as James believed in the power of our will to shape our beliefs, so too can our will, guided by reason and duty, shape our actions and, in turn, the world around us. Start today, having journeyed through the intricate landscapes of William James's The Will to Believe, and having grappled with the profound implications of conviction, faith, and the very nature of truth, we now pivot, for a crucial moment, to another cornerstone of philosophical thought that resonates deeply with the pursuit of a more enlightened future, Immanuel Kant's timeless blueprint for perpetual peace. This segment, titled Kant's Blueprint for Peace in 60 Seconds, aims to distill his monumental vision into its most potent and actionable components. These aren't just abstract theories, they are practical, foundational pillars that, if embraced, could fundamentally reshape our global interactions. Here are the 3 most critical takeaways, each a vital component of Kant's intricate design for a world without endless conflict. Our first, indispensable takeaway delves into the very core structure of nations themselves. Lasting peace, Kant meticulously argued, is profoundly dependent on the internal political constitution of individual states. He posited that true, enduring peace necessitates nations being representative republics. What does this truly mean? It implies a system where citizens, not autocratic rulers or despotic monarchs, hold the ultimate power over decisions pertaining to war and peace. In a republic, the people are sovereign. They are the ones who ultimately bear the brunt of warfare, the loss of life, the economic devastation, the profound social disruption. When the power to declare hostilities rests with those who suffer its direct consequences, a rational calculation emerges. Citizens, contemplating the immense personal sacrifices required, are inherently more cautious, more reluctant to rush into conflict than a distant ruler who might gain prestige or territory without personal cost. This internal republican structure fosters a culture of deliberation, accountability, and a powerful disincentive against aggressive expansionism, making it the bedrock upon which any broader peace initiative must be built. Without this internal reform, any external agreements are merely temporary ceasefires, vulnerable to the whims of unchecked power. Moving to our second vital takeaway, Kant's blueprint then addresses the crucial sphere of external relations between these reformed nations. Having established internally just republics, the next logical step is for these states to transcend the lawless state of nature that, sadly, still often characterizes international affairs. In such a state, each nation acts solely in its own perceived self-interest, with no higher authority to arbitrate disputes, leading inevitably to cycles of suspicion, arms races, and ultimately war. Kant's visionary solution was the formation of a voluntary federation of free states. It's critical to understand that this is not a global superstate or an empire that subsumes national sovereignty. Rather, it's a league or alliance of independent republics, voluntarily agreeing to subject themselves to a universal rule of law. This federation would mediate disputes, enforce treaties, and establish common principles of international conduct, thereby replacing brute force with reasoned discourse and legal arbitration. This move from anarchic self-help to collective security, governed by agreed-upon laws, transforms the international arena from a perilous battlefield into a forum for peaceful resolution, fostering trust and mutual respect among diverse nations. It's about collective action for a common good, a shared commitment to global stability. Finally, the third pillar of Kant's extraordinary vision extends to the universal recognition of a fundamental human right, the right to hospitality. This concept, often misunderstood, is far more profound than mere politeness. Kant argued that all individuals, by virtue of their shared humanity, possess a universal right to not be treated as an enemy when they arrive peacefully on foreign soil. This doesn't equate to an unconditional right to permanent residency or unchecked immigration. Instead, it's a moral imperative for states to offer temporary, respectful reception to allow individuals to pass through or stay for a reasonable period without fear of hostile treatment. This right to hospitality underpins the very idea of global citizenship. By recognizing and upholding this universal right, nations foster a sense of interconnectedness and mutual respect. It encourages trade, cultural exchange, and mutual understanding, eroding the provincial prejudices and xenophobia that often fuel conflict. It acknowledges that the surface of the earth belongs to humanity in common, and that our shared existence obliges us to treat one another with dignity, irrespective of national borders. This ethical foundation builds bridges rather than walls, laying the groundwork for a truly connected and respectful global community, where the other is no longer inherently a threat, but a fellow participant in the human project. These three profound principles, internally just republics, an external federation under the rule of law, and a universal right to hospitality, together form Kant's powerful, interwoven blueprint for a world moving inexorably towards perpetual peace. It's a vision that calls for both internal reform and external cooperation, an ethical awakening as much as a political restructuring, a truly monumental and enduring contribution to political philosophy, offering a timeless framework for navigating the complexities of human coexistence. This profound understanding, distilled into these three actionable insights, offers not just a hope, but a logical pathway forward. It is, indeed, a blueprint worth studying, worth advocating, and worth striving to achieve. As we bring our exploration of William James's profound collection, The Will to Believe, and other essays in popular philosophy, to a close, it's vital to remember that true philosophical inquiry is never truly finished. James himself championed an active, engaged approach to life and ideas, emphasizing that beliefs are not static objects, but living processes shaped by our choices and actions. Our journey through these essays has, hopefully, not only illuminated his groundbreaking perspectives, but also ignited new questions within you, questions that demand further reflection and, crucially, open dialogue. This isn't just an audiobook, it's a springboard for deeper thought. And the conversation, as the title of this section boldly declares, absolutely doesn't end here. One of James's most compelling essays, The Moral Equivalent of War, grapples with humanity's inherent need for struggle and purpose, and how these forces might be redirected towards peace rather than conflict. He envisioned a future where societies might find a collective, constructive outlet for their energies, paving the way for a more harmonious world, a perpetual peace. But centuries on, this ideal still feels distant and perhaps more urgently needed than ever before. So I invite you, right now, to bring your unique perspective to this timeless challenge. Scroll down to the comments section below and tell us, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to perpetual peace today? Is it deeply entrenched nationalistic fervor, an inherent human tribalism, economic disparities that breed resentment, a crisis of empathy, or perhaps something else entirely, a philosophical blind spot we collectively share? Your insights are invaluable. Don't just ponder, articulate your thoughts. Engage with other viewpoints, respectfully challenge assumptions, and let's collectively dissect this monumental question, just as James would have encouraged us to do, with intellectual rigor and an earnest desire for understanding. Your participation not only enriches this community, but also extends the very philosophical dialogue that James so fervently believed in. If you found value in this deep dive into James's thought, if his pragmatism, his radical empiricism, or his passionate defense of human agency resonated with you, and if you believe these ideas are still worth discussing in our contemporary world, please take a moment to hit that like button. It's more than just a simple click, it's a signal. It tells the algorithm that this content is meaningful, helping it reach more curious minds who might also benefit from engaging with these powerful philosophical frameworks. Every like helps to amplify the voices of thinkers like William James, ensuring that their profound contributions continue to inspire, provoke, and inform modern life. Your endorsement helps build a bridge for others to discover this intellectual journey, fostering a wider community of critical thinkers. Let's make sure these vital discussions aren't confined to dusty academic shelves, but flourish in the digital public square, accessible to anyone who seeks deeper meaning and understanding. For those of you who crave more than just superficial summaries, who yearn for thoughtful exploration and contextualized understanding of complex philosophical texts, this channel is precisely for you. If the intricate tapestry of ideas we've unraveled today has piqued your intellectual curiosity, and you're eager to continue this journey of discovery, then I wholeheartedly encourage you to subscribe for more deep dives into philosophy for modern life. By subscribing, you become an active member of a growing community dedicated to rigorous thought, intellectual growth, and the application of timeless wisdom to our present-day challenges. You'll be notified of our upcoming explorations into other influential thinkers, movements, and concepts that hold profound relevance for how we live, think, and interact in the 21st century. Join us as we continue to unlock the power of philosophical inquiry, transforming abstract ideas into actionable insights for a richer, more examined existence that empowers you to navigate the complexities of our rapidly changing world with greater clarity and purpose. Finally, philosophy, at its heart, is a communal endeavor. It thrives on shared ideas, debates, and the collective pursuit of truth. William James himself was a profound communicator, eager to share his insights and engage others in meaningful discourse. In that spirit, consider sharing this video. Think of that one friend, colleague, or family member who you know cherishes intellectual debate, someone whose perspective you genuinely value, and who you'd want in your federation of free states, a person with whom you can build a future of reasoned discussion and mutual understanding, a true ally in the intellectual realm. Send them this link. Spark a conversation offline that mirrors the one we're building here, because the most impactful ideas often take root and flourish not in isolation, but in the fertile ground of shared inquiry and genuine connection, leading to a richer understanding for all involved. Thank you for joining us on this intellectual expedition. Your engagement, your thoughts, and your commitment to exploring these profound ideas are what truly bring philosophy to life. Let's continue to build this vibrant community of thinkers, always striving for deeper understanding and a more reasoned world. Until our next philosophical adventure, keep questioning, keep believing, and keep engaging. The conversation indeed continues.